Chapter 14 of the Boy Scouts on the Trail. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Boy Scouts on the Trail by Herbert Carter. Chapter 14. Figuring It Out. "Told you so," Bumpus could not refrain from saying in triumph. Thad turned on him. "Suppose you let us know what the fellow looked like, Bumpus," he remarked. "If we happen on him in any of our wanderings, it might be just as well that we knew the kind of customer we have to deal with. Can you describe him?" "I'm afraid not, Thad," replied the fat boy a little dejectedly. "You see, just as quick as he caught sight of me turning my eyes up there, he ducked. And all I saw was that he had a face, and a kinder hairy one at that." "Oh, you mean he wore a beard?" asked the other. "Sure he did," was the reply. "That's what made me wonder whether it might have been a monkey of some sort, even if I didn't say as much to Giraffe when he was kidding me. But I happen to remember that ordinary monkeys don't grow up here in Maine." And the suggestive look he shot in the direction of Davy made that comrade sneer, as though he had grown hardened to being classed with the tree-climbing tribe, just because he could hang by his toes from a limb, or go to the tip-top of any tree that he had ever seen. "Well, he came and he saw, but he didn't conquer, not by a long sight," observed Step Hen. "He didn't like our looks one little bit, fellows, and made tracks out of here. What do you suppose brought him around in the first place?" "Mout a bein' just passin', and seein' our light in hyar, thort he'd come to look us up. If he's thet kind of varmint, he maybe thought as how thar was good pickin's to be had. But he knows better now." It was Eli who advanced this opinion. Thad had another one that was based on certain facts obtained from the Maine sheriff, who had dropped in on their camp so unexpectedly. "If that was the man called Charlie Barnes," he said, "you must remember that we heard he used to be a guide up in this country long ago, before he took to his present calling. And in that case, why, perhaps he may have known this old cabin here, and was coming to see if it would make a halfway decent place to stay for a while. Perhaps one of his friends is sick, or it might be they feel that they just have to hold over somewhere so as to lay in a stock of food. That's an idea the sheriff had, I recollect, and he wanted to keep so hot on their track that they'd find no time for hunting, and must get hungry." "Well, it was a man anyway, wasn't it?" asked Bumpus, demurely, for he felt that Giraffe owed him an apology of some sort. "Yes, it was a man," admitted that worthy frankly. "And for once you've got a bulge on me, Bumpus. Rub it in all you want to. My hide's about as thick as the skin of a rhinoceros, and I could stand it easy." "Oh, that's all right, Giraffe," replied the other, ready to forgive now that things were coming his way. "I was only thinking how queer it seems to have them hobo burglars hunting us up. Remember what I said about that fat reward we'd get if we happened to pull 'em in? A big $1,000, Mr. Green said it was, and perhaps double that by now. Well, funnier things have happened, understand, than a pack of brave scouts, tried and true, rounding up a bunch of cowardly hobos. We can do it, fellers, and not half try, if we get the chance." Again Thad thought it was one of the queerest things he had ever seen, to watch how the fire of enthusiasm seemed to burn within the breast of the usually rather timid and backward Bumpus Hawtree. Evidently he had his mind set on that reward, and could see how splendidly it would come in for the patrol in paying the expenses of another long vacation trip they had in mind. "Wonder if he'll come back any more," remarked Step Hen, as they began to move into the cabin again, there being no further reason for remaining out in the cold. "I reckon now he saw all he wanted, and didn't care about waiting to be introduced to such a gang," Giraffe chuckled. "Speak for yourself, Giraffe," remarked Davy disdainfully. "I just can't get over Bumpus here showing such a strong desire to grab these burglar fellers," Giraffe went on. "What's coming over him, do you think? We never used to think him daring or bold. He always said his heft kept him from joining in with the rest of the boys when they skated over a ticklish bender in the ice, and that he'd sure break with him some way about doing a lot of stunts. Now here he is trying to copy after Davy Jones and some of his monkey shines, and making the rest of us look like 30 cents when it comes to wanting to surround these here ferocious hobos and take 'em prisoners." Bumpus shrugged his fat shoulders and tried to look indifferent. "Huh? That's because you never really knew what I had in me," he said. calmly, though. Thad could see the merry twinkle in his eyes. It ain't always the savage-looking feller that turns out a real hero when the time comes around. Often the quiet, modest, retiring sort of chap jumps in and saves the drowning child. "Oh, that's you, is it?" demanded Giraffe, as he settled himself down in his blanket, ready to try for a little sleep. "Everything seems to be coming my way," replied Bumpus, proudly. "All you have to do is wait for the turn of the tide. I'm feeling just joyful, let me tell you. All but one thing," he added, hastily. "If I only knew about that letter business, did I deliver it at the bank, or was I silly enough to forget and lose it? Sometimes I can just see myself walking in through the door of the bank and delivering the old thing. Then it all gets mixed up, and for the life of me, I just can't say one way or t'other. If only one of you remembered seeing me go in or come out, or if I said anything about handing it over, it'd ease my mind a heap now, I tell you." Every time Bumpus got to thinking about that one trouble he lapsed into silence, because he did not seem to get any sympathy from most of his chums, Giraffe and Davy in particular being very apt to taunt him on his poor memory. Step Hen was not inclined to say very much, lest he draw the vials of the fat boy's wrath down on his head, for as we know, Step Hen had a failing himself in the line of forgetting what he had done with things he owned. Once more the boys crawled under their blankets. Each of them managed to manufacture some sort of pillow. One had taken his clothes bag, and this example several of the rest copied, as suiting their wants exactly. Bumpus, lacking enough material, had gone out to the canoe, and brought in his old haversack, from which he had extracted the very rubber foot bath which he had mentioned to his chums as belonging to Smithy. This he crammed half full of other things, and declared it made as soft a pillow as anybody wanted. "Better cover that rubber with a towel, or something like it," remarked Thad. "But this feels so nice and cool," complained Bumpus. "It may now all right, but after a while when you sleep it'll begin to draw like everything, and the chances are you'll look like a boiled lobster on one side of your face by morning. I've been there myself, and know how it smarts and burns." "Thank you, Thad, for the advice, and I'll take advantage of it right away," declared the stout scout, sweetly. "Ain't it the best thing ever to have a chum or two along, like Thad and Allen, who know so many things? Why, if it wasn't for them, the rest of us would look like babes in the woods." "Let up on that chatter, please, Bumpus," growled Step Hen. "It's getting awful late, and we ought to have been asleep long ago." "Yes, button up, Bumpus. I'd rather hear you snore than talk just now," came from under the blanket that Giraffe had wrapped himself in much after the style of a mummy. "All right, just lie on my back then, and try to accommodate you," the other shot back. "I've got one of my shoes handy, remember, and if you so much as give one little snort, I mean to shy it over in that corner," Giraffe threatened. The guides had been talking quietly among themselves, and when Thad saw Sebattis open the door and slip out, he could give a pretty good guess what the Indian meant to do. Perhaps he suspected the hoboes, lacking a boat with which to make their flight easier as long as the river continued navigable, might return in numbers later in the night in order to help themselves from the stock of old-town canvas canoes owned by the scouts' party. Yes, the shrewd Penobscot Indian did not mean that such a disaster should come to pass, and doubtless he and his fellow guides had arranged for sentry duty by turns during the entire night. Thad felt perfectly secure with such wide-awake videttes to look out for the approach of the enemy. He would have gladly taken his turn on post if asked, but it seemed as though the three guides considered that a part of their duty. They had an easy enough task as it was, with these boys so willing to paddle in turn, make fires, help cook the meals, and do all sorts of things that generally the guide has fall on his shoulders alone. Presently silence fell on the cabin. The fire smoldered on the great hearth, and occasionally flamed up, only to die down again. If it got very low, someone who happened to be awake at that time was supposed to quietly get up and put more fuel on. This had been anticipated, and there was plenty under the shelter of the cabin roof. Perhaps Bumpus believed that Giraffe really meant that dire threat he made in connection with his heavy shoe. At any rate, he did not venture to lie on his back at all, and therefore failed to emit anything that could be called a snore. Hours crept on, and the night wore away. Some of the scouts never woke up once from the time they dropped off to sleep until the delightful odor of boiling coffee gave them to understand that dawn was at hand, and Jim getting breakfast ready for the whole outfit. That caused the last of them to climb out, and there was more or less chattering as they went outside to try to find water that was not icy cold in order to wash their faces and chase the last remnants of sleep from their eyes. "I wonder," said Bumpus, looking up at the brightening sky and trying to keep from shivering as he dashed water over his rosy face, "if this is going to be a good day for bee-tree hunting, because I'll never be happy till I've seen what a real honey-hole looks like." "But remember," warned Giraffe solemnly, "we ain't filling our kettles and bathtubs with the honey. I know where a heap of it can be stowed away right now, and that's all I'm thinking about. Hey, there's Jim rattling the frying pan with that big spoon. I reckon breakfast's ready before we are. Get a move on, Bumpus." End of chapter 14.